Coaches. Today we are joined by the head coach of the Phelps School, Trey Morin. Trey, appreciate you taking the time. Coach Morin joins us after being a player at Salem State Division II school in the Northeast. After he finished his playing career, he was GA at Merrimack. At the time they were Division II, they've since moved on to Division I. Following his time at Merrimack, he moved on to Colby Sawyer and then finally Bates. And then he just completed this past season his first year as the head coach of the Phelps School, which is right outside of Philadelphia. So Trey, really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And yeah, how are things going on the East Coast?
We're good, Joel. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you doing this. I think this has been a really good series that you got. We're rolling. I think we're starting to open up slowly, and we're getting better every day, right? Like that's the goal, and hopefully we'll get to where we'll be somewhat normal here in the near future.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, how weird does it feel to not be in Waverly, Iowa right now?
I'm disappointed. I talked to Show like 2 weeks ago, and just asked him, and he's like, "Yeah, we canceled it," So I'm disappointed I can't go to the Dirty Dog and just sit in the grindhouse with you on the backcourt of the portable hoop. So that's
absolutely.
We got to adjust, right? Adapt and react and figure it out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting back, so shout out to Coach Show, man. Yeah, Snow Valley, not happening this year, but I've been talking to some people, and yeah, I think everybody's kind of in the same mindset of it's a definitely different time. So, anyway, Coach, just kind of going to get started right into it. As a player, we'll start and then moving into the coaching here later. As a player, you played a Division II at a high level. High school wise, what were you doing in the off season?
It's a good question. I think I was always the guy who had to shoot every day. That kind of was my role. So me and Ethan Rogge, I always like to say, were the original stretch fives of the mid 2000s from Creighton, right? So I think I would get shots up every single day. I felt weird if I didn't, especially early on. I think what I maybe didn't do a great job of, and one thing I always try to get our guys to do is to have a plan when you come in. So like, sit down, spend 5, 10, 15 minutes planning what you're going to do. Because I didn't really have a trainer or a workout guy or anything like that. I kind of just would go back and forth and shoot. And then as I got closer to college, I started to try to lift weights, to try to put on weight. Because when I was in high school, I was 6'8", and I weighed 165 pounds when I graduated. So I was very, very thin. Not a banger, not a high flyer. Just try to, if you touch it, it feels like leather, put it up, because if not, you're probably going to turn it over. So, all that kind of stuff. I think, nowadays kids are so leaning towards so much more specification and specialization that, they may not have that problem. But I think one thing we really try to do is get our guys in every day. We open the gym at Phelps from 3 to 5 in the summer. So I think the things that these guys are doing is much different than what I was doing even when I was in high school. And I think I always like to think I worked really hard. I maybe just didn't work as smart as I probably should have.
Mm-hmm. So when you were shooting, about how many makes were you getting a day, or how did you track it? You mentioned not having a specific plan, but I'm assuming if you're doing something like that, it's a big part of your day, every day routine. I mean, were you going in and on Mondays, I get this many, or what was that like?
Yeah. So I would usually try to make between 500 and 600 shots. And that was, including my warm up. I'd start in, right, make 5 from the side close in, 5 from the middle close in, 5 from the other side close in, and just kind of take a step back and work my way back. I do a lot of stuff coming off screens. Like I'd put balls in the chair, and because I was still I think that was my advantage, being bigger and being a little bit more of a 5 than a 4, being able to come off pin downs and stuff like that. So I worked on that a lot. Shoot a lot of threes, obviously, a lot of stuff off the bounce. It was just a lot of using my imagination, but I would try to get 500 makes a day. And I think one thing that's important is no one ever really taught me how to shoot the basketball. I kind of had a really messed up, kind of crazy form when I was in 7th grade. And I never forget this. The summer from my 7th to my 8th grade year, I watched Ray Allen shoot every single day. And I was like, that's how you shoot, right? So I do it, and I changed it. And eventually I got the number 500 because I heard it from somebody. And I was like, all right, well, if that guy made 500, that's probably what I should be doing. So, it was I'd play pickup a lot. I mean, I didn't always go in and work out. So I think one thing I always try to do was find people who were better than me. Like when I was in high school, I always try to play with adults because I always thought that was going to try to make me better. And I think it really helped me as I got older.
Mm-hmm. And so, did you play AAU?
I did. So I played, which is now, I guess, the EYBL, but it wasn't really that back then. So I played for the Albany City Rocks, which is a long-time historic program. And we actually just hired one of my former City Rock teammates to be our assistant here at Phelps. So young guys, make sure you figure out who's going to be a coach and get attached to him because they might hire you in 12 years. So, it was a good experience. I played with a lot of really good players. Tobias Harris, who plays for the Sixers, who's ironically 30 miles from us. A lot of guys who played at a high level. Reese Cofane played at Providence. We would go all over the place. I mean, buses and stuff like that. So it was a unique experience, I think, and that's where I really learned how to play a role. Because when you're playing 5 to 8 minutes a game, you're in high school. It's not the same impact as if you're playing 30 or 35 minutes. I kind of really learned to value those minutes and make the most as I can. That really helped me, especially early on when I got to college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was that? So who are you playing against? Sounds like you were playing with some dudes. Obviously, I have have an NBA player on your team. Who are some of the guys that you were going against? Because I'm assuming there's probably a few notable ones.
Yeah. So our big Rob was all Ohio Red, and they won. I mean, countless national titles. I think from the time they were little kids. They had Jared Sullinger, who played for the Celtics for a while. I think Conley was on that team, who's obviously still in the league. David Lighty, who played at Ohio State, they were very good. Played against Kyrie Irving, Kid Gilchrist, who's obviously in the league. So it was an interesting time because when you walk into the gym now, everybody knows who the good players are, right? It's that kid's got this Instagram or that kid's that's ranked. Like we played against Kyrie Irving, and I was like, Tobes, I don't know who that guy is, but he's better than you. And I'd only said that probably one time. So, it was a very interesting thing. But, it was a great experience, even as little as I maybe have played. He could have played on a better team. I'm still close to a lot of those guys today. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's baptism by fire, I guess is the best way to put it.
Gotcha. So what was the recruiting process like? Because obviously you got guys that are kind of all over. You end up going to Division II. What made that the choice, or what was your recruiting process like?
That's a good question. So I got, and this actually has really helped me as well, being a coach. I was inundated with stuff, right? I would get letters and phone calls and emails, and it was really hard for me to kind of decipher where I wanted to go, what was the best fit. I was hearing from Division I schools all the way down to like Division III, like JUCO. So it was very overwhelming. But I knew I wanted to make my decision early. So I started taking visits, in the summer going into my senior year. And I think when I went to Salem, it's a very historic town. It's probably far enough away from where I lived. It's about 4 hours. So it's far enough away from where I lived that I felt like I was away, but it was close enough that if I had to go home, I could. It was one of those places I knew I wanted to win because I never had this thing that I was going to play overseas, right? Because I know how hard it is, and I knew how hard it was. And I think, that's the thing, and this from being in Northwest and East Central is like, everybody's like, I want to be a pro. I want to be a pro. Well, like if your passport says America, right, you better be a bucket or you better be 9 feet tall. So I kind of knew that wasn't going to be the path. So I wanted to win. It's a very proud, historic program. So as soon as I got on campus, I just kind of was like, this is it. This is where I'm going to go. So, it was very overwhelming in the early stages, but I was able to kind of navigate it, talking to coaches and really just being like, I didn't like that conversation, or I'm not going to this size school. So, again, I didn't have a lot of help. I think that's the common theme in my high school trajectory. My coach was a good basketball coach, he's a really good guy, but didn't really know a ton about the college process. And it's even very different today with all the avenues that these kids have. And I think a lot of them realize it, and I try to be that buffer for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we'll get into that here in a little bit on the coaching side of it, but getting back to a little bit more of the development part of it. So now, I guess, transition between player to coach, and now having coached a little bit. What are some things as you're working with your guys now? Because you got from post grad down to freshmen,
Yeah,
correct?
fresh.
That are so obviously a 14-year-old is way different than an 18 or 19-year-old. So what's the obviously coach everybody different regardless, but
Yeah.
how do you teach or correct some of that 14 or 13, that freshman, that younger guy versus the older player? What are some of the things that you're looking at, and along those lines, what are you looking at and how are you teaching them? What are your teaching points, things along those lines?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one thing that's really helped me with that, honestly, is Snow Valley, right? Because you're thrown into like Central A with kids who never played basketball before, and then you're also like in the West, which is the high school kids, obviously. You're always talking with different kids and players and coaches. I think we hold everybody to the same IQ standard. So we have one of our freshmen this past year, he's a sophomore now. I think has a chance to be very good. He's big, he's athletic, he's got great hands, but he's only been playing basketball for a year. So he was not the best at deciphering what pick and roll coverage we were in. So he would make a lot of mistakes. So, you hold him accountable, you try to teach him, but once we get to a certain point, it's an acceptable mistake for me to either get on you about or sub you out for or whatever the case may be. A lot of these guys that I found are not as far along as I would have thought. So their IQs maybe aren't as high. So we spend a lot of time watching film of ourselves. Where in college, you spend a lot of time watching film of the other team. You might watch a little bit of film of yourself. We watch a lot of film of us. So with the younger guys, it's a lot of just like explaining to them why, this is where you have to be. Here's why you have to be like that. And as long as they're making the effort to be in the right spot, we're probably in a good place. Because again, we're not counting on them for us to be successful as much as maybe we are a junior or senior or a PG, and then it's a little bit of a different conversation because they know where they're supposed to be, but we're in a different situation too, right? Because if you get a post grad, you only got him for a year. So you don't know what that kid has been taught or what he hasn't been taught or the quality, right, of the coaching that he's had in the past. So the gap between the knowledge of some of the freshmen that we have and some of the PGs we have is actually not that big. So it's just kind of, we do a lot of, whole. So we'll show it whole, then we'll bust up and do, individual stuff, like whatever it is, like, coming off pin downs. Cause this is action that we run a lot of chin stuff. So coming off the chin cut, and then we'll do whole again and kind of play live. So it's a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's a process really, no matter how old the kid is.
Gotcha. And so then specifically on shooting, if I come in and, you've seen my jumper. So I come in and say, hey, yo, like I'm broke. So how are you fixing somebody's shot, or what are the things that you've noticed? And because you talked about building your shot with 3-on. So what were the things you were teaching yourself?
Yeah, I think the first thing that a lot of coaches maybe don't, I don't know if people agree with this or not, but I think everybody's shot is individualized. So, like, if you look at, Bird, Miller, Steph Curry, right? Like, they all shoot differently. No one looks the same. I think the thing that I always try to implore upon them is no matter what it looks like, make sure you're balanced, right? I'm a big step into your shot 1-2 guy. Like, I don't really think hopping is effective because, when you jump, no one hops and goes to try to get the rebound, right? You take 1-2 steps and then you go up. So that's where you kind of generate your power from. So I try to break that down as much as I can. Then really just finishing with, your body square to the rim, jumping a little bit forward. So I try not to get too caught up in what their elbow looks like or anything like that, as long as they finish their shot the right way. So those are two big things. Wrinkle the wrist, obviously, have it cocked back. Shot reconstruction takes a long time, and that's something that I think is best done in the summer. So those are the three things: balance, right? Make sure you're 1-2 into it. Finish up high with your wrist wrinkled, and I think you'll be all right.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So then what have you found at your various stops as a player leading to your coaching now are commonalities or things that great players or good players do regularly, or what are their traits?
That's a good question. So I think the first thing is they spend a lot of time on it. I think, a lot of the old adage, right? The good shooters are made, not born, is I think very true. I think if you're making 500 to 1,000 shots a day, right? No matter what your form looks like, you're probably gonna be able to shoot the ball pretty well. Now, there's other factors that determine what level you play at, right? A lot of it is your DNA. But if you can shoot it, you can shoot it. So that's one thing, the amount of time, energy, and effort that they put into their craft. The second thing is probably their willingness or ability to be coached, right? Like, I think that's number two. You see the best players are always wanting to know more, and they're holding their coaches accountable in a lot of ways. Like, if you are incorrect about something, right, they're asking why this happens or why this didn't happen. They're always asking good questions. They're receiving feedback, but also giving feedback. I found is because then it turns into more of a dialogue, and I think the player can learn more if they know why. And then the third thing is like I said, probably unfortunately DNA, right? Like, I think the most successful players have a certain DNA structure to them: size, physicality, ability to run, jump, and dunk. But there's how many of those kids exist that can't play dead in a cowboy movie, right? They exist. So I think the combination of all three of those things is what makes a good player great.
Mm-hmm. And so now when you're looking for players to come play for you and for people or players and coaches that are watching, you've got a couple high major players, you've got a few low major. You talk, I guess, where do most of your players go? We'll start there.
That's a good question.
Obviously, you got done with 1 year, so.
Yeah, so historically, Phelps has been pretty competitive. We just graduated from high school, or from college, excuse me. Mike Watkins, who played at Penn State, who was the Big Ten defensive player of the year. Quincy McKnight, who was the Big East defensive player of the year, just graduated. So those are both Phelps guys. Terry Larry played at UConn. He's had a couple stints in the D League. We're hoping he'll crack a roster. So he played at Phelps. So those are all Phelps guys. For us this past season, we had one kid going to the SoCon. He's going to VMI. He's actually there right now. 4 kids go Division II, and then 2 kids go Division III. So we kind of run the gamut. I think this year we're a little bit more higher level in terms of where our guys are going to end up. Now, does that equate to us being better? I'm not really sure. But, our guys are getting recruited at a much higher level. So we have, our probably highest recruited kid has offers from every Power 5 conference. He's got his list, and it's got some who's who of basketball on it. We have a young kid that I think is going to be pretty good. He just got offered by Brian. He's already gotten offered by Siena, but I think as he develops, we'll see what happens. We have a mid-major he could crack high major if he gets a little bit better, point guard. And then we have a freshman I think that's going to be pretty good. And then we have some kids that, if they play their way into it, like Ivy Patriot level kids, but if not, somebody will definitely pay for them to go to school. So we're a little bit more basketball focused than most high schools, I think would be the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And so what types of things are those guys doing to work to that level? Obviously you've been around got places, but I think sometimes in some players that I've talked to, they don't know what it takes. And I think that can be, like you mentioned, very hard when you don't know. So obviously when there's a lot of good players around you, you're either going to quit or you're going to get better. Like, that's not very fun. Yeah.
So I think, again, the commonality is, and there's 3 things that we really look for. I think the first thing is your talent level already. And that, again, that varies with how old you are. Like if you're going to be a PG for us, like you probably have to come in anticipatingly, I know that's not a word, but anticipatingly, you're going to have an impact on what we're doing. If you're younger, freshman, sophomore, and we're looking to bring in, it's probably going to be more of, are you coachable? What are your physicals like? Do I think that you're a high character kid that we can work with? Because as you know, and Joel, you've been here, like we're a very small school. So if you're a jerk, that stands out, so we can't really take those kind of kids. So I think and as far as where they're working to get to a certain level, I think we got guys that are in the gym every single day. They're committed to the court, but they're also committed to weightlifting. I think you'll find that earlier now than maybe when I was a kid or when, previous to me. Kids are in the weight room a lot more. Their bodies are changing a little bit faster. And I think that's because, and I say this to all my kids, colleges are much more willing to take a grad transfer or a JUCO kid than they are to take a high school kid. So what are you doing to make yourself close that gap between you and the JUCO kid? You know, and a lot of it is physical, right? Like it's strength, it's ball skills and stuff like that. So those are a little bit of stuff. I mean, I think we try to recruit kids with high GPAs. I mean, coming from Bates, it's a very high academic school. It's a top 15 liberal arts school in the country. So, you know, I just have kind of carried that with me, that typically the kids that work hard in the classroom, the kids that work hard on the court. So that's just a little caveat of what else kids can kind of do.
Mm-hmm. And so then now looking towards this off season and guys, and maybe you can think of a specific example or go general, whichever you prefer, guys that are working. You said the gym's open from 3 to 5. So what types of things are players adding to their game, and kind of how are they going about doing it? Or how do you recommend going about improving your game? Because I think depending on where you're at in the country, you've either got a month or 3 or 4 weeks, or who knows until you're going back to
absolutely.
School. So
yeah, I think you know, and I sit down when kids commit with us, so they decide they're coming, they sign their enrollment agreement, they make their deposit. I'll kind of sit down with them and watch 3 or 4 games, and kind of say, okay, this really translates. This is what we got to get better at. So I try my best to make an individual plan for every kid that comes in and say, like, okay, like, you know, tell me where you want to go. And, you know, inevitably every kid with a 4.0 and a 1400 says, I want to go to the Ivy League, right? Okay, well, let's actually watch what Ivy League basketball looks like, because it's probably not what you think it is, right? So, you know, we sit down, we watch, and we say, okay, you got a shot, here's what you got to get better at. So each kid is kind of working on different things. And I think from a specific standpoint, we have a wing who's about 6'7", probably about 205, 210. He's a pretty put together kid that played at a smaller school in this area, and he's kind of transitioning more so to the wing. Like, I would call him a wing, but I think when he starts to get uncomfortable or things start to get hairy, he kind of starts to migrate down to the block. So we've kind of tried to make him more of like a ball handler, right? And like, these are your reads off the pick and roll, and this is what you can do from here. So it really varies kid to kid. I mean, we'll have kids that come in and are post grads, and like, it's, if they can make a jump shot, they'll be fine, right? So then it's just like, all right, we're repping the hell out of your jump shot, and we're getting up 500 or 600 a day. And ultimately, if you're not willing to come in, and they're using our old gym, Joel, and you've been here, and that gym is probably, you know, talk about a grindhouse, right? It's probably 95 degrees in there. So, and there, if you're not willing to put in that work, that time, and using that effort, like, we're not going to talk about you going to somewhere where they're going to pay for you to go to school. So a lot of it is just individual based. I sit down and kind of do that. And I think the best way for young kids to do that is ask, right? Ask one of your coaches. They may not have thought to do that. They may not, you know, they may not have the resources, but ask them. If you have a school that you really want to go to, send that coach an email, because the thing that a lot of kids don't understand is the assistants get paid to sit there and check their email all day, right? So they'll get back to you if you ask some thoughtful questions, especially if we're in the middle of a pandemic and those guys don't got anything to do anyway. So
yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I like how you point out the assistant coach, because yeah, if you email the head coach,
yeah, don't email the head coach.
I'm not going to say how many emails are in most of their inboxes, but don't hold your breath for the reply. But yeah, I think that's
even a grad assistant, right? Like, because those are the guys that they don't get to interact with players a lot, like especially high school players. The ops guys, you know, they all got assistant to the special assistant guy, whatever it is, right? Like, send them an email. They'll get back to you as long as you reach out to them. It's completely within the rules. Send them your tape and say, hey, listen, I'd really like to play wherever. What are some things I can get better at? I almost guarantee you they get back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was one of the many fun GA responsibilities back in the day. So then what, okay, so with your guy that's transitioning out, because I think that no one wants to play no one posts up so how are you working on his handle? I think that's interesting because I'm always looking for better ways to help guys improve our handle. Because if you're 6'5",
Yeah.
like you said, you're transitioning to the wing exactly because who wants to play inside threes and work more than two?
Yes, and I think he was in a weird spot because I think it was the age-old thing, right? Like, he's 6'7", and his high school coach was great. Like, would let him play on the wing. Like, he was shooting threes, he was handling the ball. But the biggest thing, and I told him this, is when things get kind of crazy, right? There's 2 minutes left. You guys are up 3. They call whatever. Like, where do you go? Right to the block, right? And that's not wrong as long as you have a matchup that you can do that, right? But if we're playing West Town, who's the best team in our league, if we're playing Hill School, who's got a massive lineup, if we're playing Perkiomen, right, like, you're not going to have somebody that you can just turn and shoot over you on. So what are you going to do? So some of the stuff we're doing, it's really basic stuff. It's a lot of like, all right, catch it, right? We swing it, you catch it. I'm going to set a ball screen. We're going to work on the ice set real quick, right? So it's just you're going down off the ice, hit it back. Now you're coming off a handoff, 1 or 2 dribble jump shot, right? It's not a lot of like bing, 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 go, right? Like, it's just a lot of situational stuff that hard hedges. A lot of our teams in our league will do that. Drop stuff. It's just really getting them more comfortable, more so in the pick and roll than like, again, bing, 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 and go. I think that's what, when coaches say we wish he handled the ball better, in my mind's eyes, that's what I think they mean, right? Like, I wish he was better coming off screens. I wish he was better, maybe in the open floor, but a lot of times if you're a good player, you can handle the ball in the open floor and kind of just go. If you're going to catch it and rip on somebody, like, that's 1 or 2 bounces. So, those are certain things specifically that we're really working on with him. And I think he's getting better at it. I think, time will tell, I guess, at the end of the
day. Gotcha. So you talked about if you're a bigger guard transitioning to be on the wing. How about for point guards? What do you have? Because you mentioned you have a pretty good point guard that's younger. What types of things is he working on?
Yeah. So again, I think we're very pick and roll heavy. I think just with my kind of offensive background and honestly the personnel that we have, and we have a big kid that's 7 feet, very athletic, 260, can really stretch the floor vertically. So we, are kind of hard pressed not to play a lot of pick and roll. So and he's from Texas, so it's a lot of Zoom conversations with him and like, what are you doing? How are you doing that? He's got a pretty good guy that he works out with that played for a long time overseas, and I think he played in Spain, so that's kind of the ball screen capital of the world in a lot of ways. So he's, that's something I can see him getting better at if he hasn't already made a jump. I mean, he's another kid. Like, I think the more comfortable he gets with the ball in his hands, the better he'll be. Because I think right now he sees himself as a combo, like, I'm going to go try to get one, where, like, I think if he can be a little bit more of the set the table, like, the tag guy's here, I'm going there, right? The tag guy's not there, I'm dropping to a big, and then I can also score. I think that'll improve his just overall game. Because ultimately, right, all we're really trying to do as coaches is get the kid to be as good as he can be. It's the college coach's job to figure out all the other stuff, right? And we'll put them in front of them, but ultimately their recruitment is dictated by how good they are, and we'll do everything we can do to make them as good as we can possibly do it. So.
And so with COVID and whatnot, obviously you're in it with guys that are getting recruited now. What advice would you give? Are you telling your players? Because I think it sounds like you guys are going to try to play. I have no idea what we're going to do. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor nor a person that can predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. But what advice are you giving your guys with kind of so much being unknown? There's obviously no EYBL, no AAU all summer. What can a high school player do? Because I know a lot of guys were, that's usually when a few guys come onto the scene that had been putting in that work. So what advice are you giving your guys now?
Absolutely. I think, and it's, I try to say this to every kid, whether, when they come on a visit here or if I just speak to, I cannot implore kids enough. They need to take control of the process. Don't let your high school coach or your AAU coach or your handler, like, it's really hard for kids to have that, that conversation with them. But I think the important thing is like, you have to have control of it. What does that mean, right? That means not sitting back and waiting for schools to recruit you, because ultimately I'm of the belief that the NCAA is going to strap the coaches down for the fall. So they're not going to be able to go out in the fall. So how do I get recruited? Email them, call them, right? Send them your highlight film, put something together. Most schools nowadays have Huddle, right? Or Crossover or some form of video sharing. So I think taking that time, putting in, again, the time, energy, and effort to make a highlight video. If your coach won't do it for you, you can do it yourself and blast it out. All the emails for all the colleges in the world are on the website. Right. Use your Google. It's free. And you can Google any school in the country, go to their basketball page and send it to the assistant coaches. Don't send it to the head coach. Send it to the assistant coaches. And eventually somebody will get back to you. I think that it's time intensive, and we do it for all our guys here, and our guys are fortunate and they know that. But we also have a little bit bigger of a staff than most high schools in that aspect. So I think taking control, sending email, calling, right, getting in the gym when you can, as long as it's safe. Those are kind of the things that I would implore kids to do. Don't turn down your college options. If you think you're a high major Division I player and a Division III school calls you, you probably should have a conversation with them, because there's a good chance that their talent evaluation eye is better than yours, and you should probably talk to that person and not burn the bridge with them.
Mm-hmm. So kind of bringing this full circle back to a little bit of hoop stuff. What are some of the drills or shooting competitions or things like that? If I'm a player, I'm watching this, and you gave me great advice on recruiting, and I'm a little bit inspired to go work on my game. What are some end of workout things or stuff that when players do it, you're like, that actually translates to getting you better, instead of the 7 dribble through 4 cones, and then I do a push up and a cartwheel, and then I shoot a layup?
I think so. One thing I'm huge on is keeping track of MIGs in a certain amount of time. So one thing we do every single day here at Phelps is 50 and 5. So 50 MIGs from 3 in 5 minutes. We do that every single day. And that's usually just partners, and you just shoot threes. You can't take the same shot twice. You shoot 3 threes, and then you take a 1 dribble pull up, and you count your makes. If you can make 50 in 5 minutes, that's pretty good. We have a toy championship belt that we use, and if you win that day, if you get the record for that day, you get to keep the belt, and it's pretty competitive. Our guys kind of get into it, and that's kind of our drill. So, and it's simple, right? You don't need a lot of stuff to do that. You don't even really need a partner. If you just shoot it, go chase it down, and go to the area and give yourself 6 minutes, right? And if you the better misses you have, the easier it is. So if you're a good shooter and you focus on small misses, it'll go right through the hoop and you can shoot more shots. If you're not a great shooter and the ball's going all over the place, you're probably not going to be able to make as many shots. So that's one thing that we do a lot. I'm big into, like, again, situational shots. Like, what shots do you take in a game? Are you a lift guy in the pick and roll like I was? Are you a trail guy in transition? Right? I always say to our guys, like, there's 2 complete players in the entire world, and one of them's LeBron James, and in my opinion, right, the other one's Kevin Durant. That's not you. No one here is that. So let's figure out what you're really good at, and let's do that a lot. And then we can kind of work on your weaknesses as we do that. So I would say, kids, figure out what actions your coach has you do, and do that a lot. Spend a majority of your workout doing that, which is why I spend a lot of my time shooting threes and kind of trying not to get bullied in the block and stuff like that. So it's, I think those kinds of things are really helpful. So 50 and 5, any kind of situational stuff where you're either in the pick and roll, or like you're the ancillary guy in the pick and roll. If you're a big, right, you're rolling to the rim, catching, making a pass, roll to the rim, catch, layup, roll to the rim, catch, step through, 1 dribble, pass the other side. Things that are applicable to the game.
Mm-hmm. So kind of practice what you're going to do in the game. Is that what
Absolutely.
I'm hearing?
Yeah, because
kind of think like,
you don't want the first time you do something to be in a game, right? I think that's of utmost importance.
Mm-hmm. So you're going through a progression where, okay, if I catch it, option one on this roll is I'm going to lay it up. Option two is, oh, they came here, I'm kicking to the
Yeah,
corner, etc. So
absolutely. And you
players,
do that with anybody, right? And then eventually you'll get to where, at least this is how we do it, like, our basic kind of warm up stuff. And I work with the bigs a lot. So it's just a lot of like, roll, I hit you. All right, I'm going to tell you to pass it, or I'm going to tell you to score it. And you don't know which one I'm going to say. So then you don't kind of get robotic with it. I think throwing change ups to kids are really important. And I think with the way the game is going, if you're one of the rare kids, right, that's 6'9", 6'10", I think some of the things you got to work on is catching it on the roll, right, catching it on the perimeter. I think with the way everything's going, there's just the game is outlawing guys who are posting up. And it's not that I don't think that that's effective, but if you really watch, Draymond Green is the example I always use, right? Like everyone thinks he's this great post defender, but a lot of times when people are trying to post up, he's got two hands in somebody's back and they're just letting him drive everybody off. Well, that translates to the high school game, right? Like, why am I going to try to force it down to a 7-foot kid when the 5'10" kid can use two hands and just dislodge him and the refs don't call it? So, I think a lot of the rolling to the rim, shooting threes, doing dribble handoff stuff that's just the way the game's going, unfortunately. Whether you agree with it or not, you got to kind of adapt to it.
Mm-hmm. And last thing I kind of want to touch on, because you mentioned that you were shooting a lot of threes and you meant just a couple different things throughout. How are you working on finishing around the rim? Because obviously you got a very talented league where if you toss it up, just volleyball style, you may be getting a concussion because it's coming back at your head.
Yeah, I think that is probably not only in college one of the biggest adjustments that guards face. I think in our league specifically, it's a huge adjustment. I mean, next year, so we have 3 7-footers on our team next year, and we are not the biggest team in the league. The positional size in PACES specifically, which is the independent school league in Pennsylvania, is much bigger than I had thought. There's 6'6" guards, there's 7-footers on almost every team. So some of the things that we really work on is finishing with contact, right? Especially if you're a smaller guard. The most important thing you can have, I think, in today's game is a runner and a floater, kind of that in-between shot. I'm more of a dominant hand guy. So, like, if you're finishing, even if you're on the right side, I would rather you try to finish with your strong hand. And having solutions around the rim, I think, is important, right? Like, as I'm coming up and there's a big coming, what am I doing? Because if I just try to go up and lay it up normally, what is he going to be able to do? Time it out, right? So, like, I've got to do something, whether it's same foot, same hand, right, up and under with the rim. It's just having solutions at the rim. And I think with our bigs, it's a lot of, like, second jump stuff. So it's a lot of, like, throw it up, get the rebound, come down, go right back up, try to score with contact. We use blocking pads a lot. We use other human beings a lot. I think that's important. I think putting live finishing on stuff is great. We do the DeMatha finishing thing every day where you have two kids, like one kid on the block, another kid on the block, and I'm here and I just throw it, and it's basically like a dunk fest unless I give the defense some days I'll give the defense an advantage, and some days when I'm feeling mean I'll give the offense an advantage. I just like to see some kids just get. It depends on how bad of a day I had, I guess. So it's, I think, there's a lot of meanings at the rim, but it also teaches our kids to have solutions, right? And I don't say, like, you go with this guy, big with big. I just, like, you guys figure it out. I think that's one thing that we as coaches don't do enough is during the drills, like, we want it to look a certain way or we want it to do this, but the game isn't like that, right? The game is kind of organized chaos. So the more time that we try to spend telling them what to do or getting them organized is eventually going to bite you in the backside. So I try to, and that drill just specifically is always a mess. So that's why I said it like that. I just you guys figure it out. If we got a point guard going against Sammy, who's 7 feet, like, whatever, they'll get better at it. Like, either that kid's going to get dunked on, he's going to learn how to strip it. Sam's going to learn how to keep it high if there's a small guy, or the guard will learn how to kind of go up and under and figure it out. So, having solutions at the rim is important. Being able to finish with contact is important, and having kind of like those little floater runner things is also equally important.
Got it. Any last advice, nuggets of knowledge as we finish up for players for the rest of the summer, moving into the fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a crazy time, man. I think it's COVID has really thrown a curveball in a lot of the stuff, and I think for me specifically, things that um, I thought were really important, like AAU, and you got to be in the gym, you got to be doing this, you got to be doing that. While that stuff is important, I think having a forced break has really kind of opened my eyes and made me understand that like we can survive without basketball. But to make it not important is the wrong thing. So what I'm trying to say is value this time that you have. It's been taken away from you, and I try not to put myself around guys who don't go to the gym a lot or don't put a lot of time, energy, and effort into them. But I've heard that those kids do exist. So if you are one of those kids, think about for the last 3 months you haven't been able to go. What are you going to do when the gyms open up in your area, or if there's a small allotment of time that you can use? What are you going to do to kind of get that back? And I think that's really what a lot of us have kind of learned is to value this game that we have, because I think eventually, right, you're going to stop coaching, I'm going to stop coaching, the kid's going to stop playing, and the game will move on without us. So what are we doing during our time in this game to make as big of an impact, but also get the most out of it that we can? So
Awesome. Absolutely. So, how can I get a hold of you? Anybody wants to reach out? What's the Instagram, Twitter? What do you got?
So I'm not a huge picture guy. I actually don't have an Instagram, but you can DM the Phelps Instagram. So we have a Phelps basketball Instagram. It's Phelps Hoops. My Twitter is Trey Morin, my first and last name. And I'm always available on email, tmorin, MORIN, @thephelpsschool.org. And I'm always looking to help players. I think, even if you don't play for us or have an interest in playing for us, I'm always willing to kind of chop it up with people that like basketball. So.
Excellent. Well, yeah. Coaches, players, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe below. Instagram and Twitter @GameShotsBB. Thanks for watching, Trey. Really appreciate you taking the time. And we'll see you next time. We got some new things coming in the upcoming videos, going on a little road trip.